I'm going to take you through how to make the Inuit art as part of our WOW Day for our Pugs of the Frozen North topic. So as you've seen on the smartboard, we're going to be making a Northern Lights scene, so the beautiful lights in the sky, and we're going to have an Inuit in the forefront of our picture. So our artwork comes in two stages. We need to make the background and let it dry, and then we need to stick our collage Inuit on the top once it has dried. So I'm actually going to start with my Inuit. I'm going to just quickly plan out on my scrap piece of paper what I'd like my Inuit to look like and roughly what size it's going to be, because this is the size of my artwork. So remember, the Inuit are big boulders which were used to make structures that looked a bit like humans, and sometimes they would be pointing. So I'm going to do some boulders like this, maybe a larger one here for the body. I've only got a small piece of paper to make this from, so I'm going to keep it simple. Doesn't need to be a work of art. Then, now that I've got my rough guide, I'm going to try and cut from my sugar paper some of the rocks. Now, the brilliant thing about the fact that we are making rocks is that there is no need to be overly neat with this, because rocks come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. So, I haven't drawn it onto my sugar paper. You can do if that would make you feel more confident. It's entirely up to you, or you can freehand what you're doing. But just make sure that you're not going to run out of your paper and that you're not making them too big. So I've got a slightly wonky one here. I'm just going to cut this one down to make it more comparable in size. There we go, that's a bit better. I might decide while I'm cutting my rocks that I'm going to have a slightly different formation. That's okay to do as well. We need to make sure that we keep these safe, so I would recommend that when you're finished with them, you pop them in your tray, because we're not going to be sticking them onto our artwork until the background has dried. So I'm going to cut the big rock, which are my pointing arms. So I can decide whether I want it to be almost pointing or whether I want it more central. I think that one's too thick. I don't want it to be too big on my artwork, because I do want to see some of this lovely background that we're creating as well. One final boulder for the head. Okay, I'm quite pleased with my Inuit. So it's going to look like a silhouette of an Inuit on my Aurora Borealis background. That's my posh name for the Northern Lights. Okay, so these are going to go in my tray, nice and safe, until later. So for the next part of my artwork, we are definitely going to need to put down something to protect the table. It's a nice piece of messy artwork today, and we are using something called Brusho inks. Now, these do stain, as you can see from the state of my paws here, that they do stain your skin. So I'm going to ask you not to touch the inks when they are wet. Your teachers are going to have some lovely gloves, and we will be picking up the artwork for you. So to make your Aurora Borealis background, you're going to be using some dry Brusho inks. So these inks they're little powders, and when you add water to them, they become liquid inks. They've all got little holes in the top of the pots, and you can see, excuse me, you can see what colour they are by reading on the side. So I think I want a mixture of I like the idea of a purple, emerald green sounds like it would work well. Ultramarine, a sort of blue. Have a look. I'm going to go for a couple of blues. So what I'm going to do is, on my dry piece of paper, I'm going to start adding some ink. Now, I don't need a lot. You might have to be patient because we haven't got a huge amount of these pots, but you'll all have a chance to have a go with them. So I'm mixing my colours. I might try and do, so I've got some green here. I might try and do a bigger patch of green because I think that that's the colour I think of most when I consider the Northern Lights. Don't worry if the green looks brown when you're first putting it on. It is that colour until you add water. I'm going to add some of my darker blue down at the bottom. You can always add some more as you go through. Now I'm going to make sure before I start using my spray bottle that my inks are well and truly out of the way, because if they get wet in the pots, no one else will be able to use them. Okay, so now I'm making sure that I have got the cover on my table properly, and we're going to be using spray bottles of water. Unfortunately, these spray bottles are a bit more powerful than I would have liked, so you need to make sure that you're sitting back in your seat because we don't want any of this to go onto your clothes. And you're going to, as gently as you can, start to spray the water onto your background. So you can see here that we're activating those dried inks and we're starting to get a bit of a pattern. Now this doesn't look like the Northern Lights at the moment, so I do need to spray some more water. So I'm going to get a little bit closer this time, and as I spray a bit closer, I can start to move the inks around. If I angle the bottle a bit more, I'm really starting to blend those colours. Now I think that I've used a little bit too much ink on here. I'm going to call my teacher over because she's wearing gloves. Would have been a good idea if I put those on first, wouldn't it? And what you can do is just gently tip some of that underneath. Paper towels might be a good idea. You're going to let the ink run off a little bit, but now you can see I have got quite a nice block of colour here. You can also ask your teacher to come around, because they're wearing gloves, to just fill in any white gaps that you have. It's really important that you've written your name on before you start this artwork. Should have said that at the beginning. Okay, but this is what we're going to be doing today. You might want to have a practice on a scrap piece of paper before you begin. I'm just going to quickly have a try with using slightly less of the Brusho ink. So I'm just going to do a tiny bit of purple there. I'm going to have some of the aquamarine, and let's try and find our green. You can't not have green in your Northern Lights. So I've hardly got any on here, and we'll see what the difference is on this one. So as I'm adding, my paper is still getting that nice effect. I've got a little bit more control over the colours that I am creating. Looks a bit like fireworks at the moment, so I'm going to try and get those little lines out. Now I think I haven't got enough colour here, so I'd actually like a bit more green. So I can, if I need to, put a bit more ink on after I've got my paper wet. You can see you get lots of little lines in there, and I'm just going to use my water to add some more to that. So then I can move it around my paper. Remember, please don't pick up your paper because this ink will stain your hands and your clothes. Okay, so here I've got a lighter version of the Northern Lights and my darker version there. And they will be put out to dry. There we go, move the camera slightly so you can see. And that's what we're going to do. So once that's dried, we're going to come back and we're going to arrange our Inuit onto our artwork. So if I just show you on a wet one here what a final example would look like. It's not a good idea for you to put your Inuit on while it's wet because they won't last very well. But our end product is going to end up looking a little something like this.